Hey everybody, welcome. Aloha. I'm Natalie, and this is Life After a Cult, the channel where we expose cult nonsense. We laugh at the absurdity and hopefully unbrainwash ourselves in the process. Thank you, moderators, for being here, and everybody in the live chat. Great to see you. Members, I appreciate your extra help so much. You really helped me out the other day during our members only live, and I appreciate it. Today, I am excited once again because Jon Atack is here to gross us out, to completely trigger me with his truth. And there is so much truth. Today, we're going to be talking about the shocking truth that what I think you're really known for is exposing L.Ron Hubbard's secrets. And we're also going to talk about David Miscavige, the current leader of Scientology, and his ruthless coup.
Ruthless coup. It's interesting. I was thinking this very day, what word sums up David Miscavige? And that word is ruthless.
Ruthless. Wasn't that the name of...
No mercy, no concern, no compassion,
Yeah.
no sympathy, no empathy.
That was also the name of his father's book, wasn't it? That
it
Ronnie
was,
Miscavige wrote
absolutely.
about him.
Yeah, and
Ruthless.
I had the great good fortune to interview Ron Miscavige, and I really liked him. He played trumpet for me after we'd finished recording as well.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah.
I had a question for you, Jon, from the last time we talked a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking about this. One of the truth bombs that you dropped is you said that the current leader of Scientology, David Miscavige, used to go with Pat Broker, who is the guy who was supposed to run Scientology, but David Miscavige was like, I don't think so. And then David Miscavige had him followed for decades at great expense to Scientology.
24 years, $11 million. What your donations buy.
$11 million.
$11 million. Tony Ortega interviewed the two PIs who did it.
That's
and
right.
they were sort of trying to put pressure on Miscavige to pay his bill. And
That's
after
right.
Tony had published it, that they got their bill paid. But yeah, $11 million for 24 years of surveillance.
That's crazy. Yeah. I'm making a note because I want to
Yeah.
I want to pull up that article at some point and maybe share that information.
Yeah.
Do a reaction video to it. So I was noodling on this, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder where that came from. And so I wanted to ask you, because you had said that David Miscavige and Pat Broker would take some of the money that they were supposed to give or gave to L.Ron Hubbard and go to Vegas and not just gamble, but indulge with some ladies of the night, shall we say.
Ladies of the night.
So where did this information come from?
I'm blaming Jesse Prince.
Okay.
Jesse, I think he maybe said it on stage at Toronto 10 years ago now at the Getting Clear of Scientology conference, which we're gradually putting the videos up from, because 10 years was long enough for me to wait for Jim Beverly to make any money back on it. And I never intended to make money from it, and I didn't. So my intention was absolutely fulfilled. But I think he said it during one of his two remarkable talks. But then I had a lot of conversations with him during that week as well, so it may not have been. And what he said was that he had an order come down from Hubbard saying that he had to give David Miscavige a confessional. And Jesse said that Miscavige was crying when he came into the auditing room. He was so freaked out knowing, what might come out. And Jesse said that during that session, he confessed that. So what used to happen was that David Miscavige would, be sent a message to do something for Hubbard, and then he would go and meet Pat Broker, who was Pat Nanny Broker were looking after Hubbard in his derelict and demented state by this time. Apparently, Pat Broker was doing some very serious drinking to help Ron achieve the next level.
So it wasn't just L.Ron Hubbard. Was L.Ron Hubbard drinking as well?
Yes, to the point of alcoholism, and he actually had to have medical treatment for that during those last years. And of course, the visceral in his system is the one that's always been contentious, that he actually was pumped up with psychiatric drugs by the time he died, which is kind of going, what OT level is that?
Yeah.
I seem to be being a little bit sarcastic tonight. I'm sorry about that.
No apologies, Jon. We like sassy Jon.
So during that time, Hubbard went into hiding in 1979. That is tone -8 on the emotional tone scale, by the way, hiding. And that was where he stayed for the last 6 years of his life. And because they're terrified that the FBI would come along and get him. I'm going to say a little bit of a detour. David Miscavige's job, what he was appointed to do was he ran the All Clear unit. And he worked under Diane Didi Vogerding, who was the chairman of the Watchdog Committee, which meant she took her advices straight from L.Ron Hubbard. And that was the other thing. They were really scared that Hubbard would get got for all of the money he'd ripped off from Scientology. This guy left $648 million. And that's just what he hadn't managed to spend. All of that money came from Scientology. None of it came from the sale of fiction. That's a nonsense. So that had come out of, Scientologist pockets, gone to him. Inured is the word that the Internal Revenue Service used for it. Had inured to L.Ron Hubbard, who just sort of raked it out of the bank accounts. I've talked with many people over the years who ferried money to L.Ron Hubbard from, bank accounts in Liechtenstein or Switzerland or wherever. And so during this period, I am told, David Miscavige did not ever see L.Ron Hubbard. Of course he wouldn't. They're using a cutout system whereby Miscavige would go somewhere furtively, make sure he wasn't being followed, and then in through the back door would come Pat Broker, and they'd do whatever they were going to do, and then Pat would go back and creep back into the property at Creston, near San Luis Obispo, where Hubbard lived out his final days. So what Jesse said was that during this confessional, David Miscavige admitted that they had skimmed money from L.Ron Hubbard's accounts. There's an interesting thought.
Yeah. So he's getting his interrogation there. David Miscavige admits that they took money. So they took some of this cash. But there's more to the story.
There's more to the story. And then it came up that they were actually using this money. They weren't just taking the money to, take the money. They wanted to gamble with it. So one of their meetings, or more than one of their meetings, was in Las Vegas, according to, if I've remembered what Jesse said, and I hope Jesse's watching and will put me right if not. Lovely guy, Jesse, you really like him. And a great storyteller. He was phenomenal on the stage. Some of the stories about Hubbard were just unbelievable.
I'd love to interview Jesse. I reached out once on Facebook, but I didn't hear back from him, but I would love to talk to him.
I was in touch with him for the first time in years the other week because I'm trying to clarify something about L.Ron Hubbard and Markabians at the moment, which is the final little bit of the book I'm writing.
Well, when you talk to him again, say, hey, Natalie over at Life After a Cult would love to talk to you if you're game. Yeah. Jesse helped get my sister out of Scientology.
Oh, excellent.
I don't know if he remembers that. My sister Lana, it was a conversation she had with Jesse that really helped her to walk away.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he is a charismatic human being. He definitely is. So yeah, he says that then what happened was that somehow the confessional reports didn't get to Hubbard. We don't know.
So what exactly was in the confessional reports? He took the money. He went to Vegas. But is that where he admitted to the prostitutes? Yeah,
he'd taken money. They'd gone to Vegas, and if I have remembered aright, they put money into the the roulette wheel, and they went whoring.
Whoring.
They went a whoring. So
wow.
Scientology is the most ethical group on the planet. Remember that. And it is therefore run by the most ethical man on the planet, David Miscavige. I want to add something to that. All of the legal documents that L.Ron Hubbard signed or allegedly signed during that period, during that last 6 years of his life, are notarized by David Miscavige, who had, taken a license as a notary public. Now, none of them are therefore legal, because a notary public must be in the presence of the person when they sign the document.
Yes.
That means that the order or the demand that Hubbard's body be quickly cremated after his death was actually, which I think was meant to be signed 3 days before he died, it's probably not his signature, and the notarization is fake, and there was probably a good reason to get rid of his body before a full autopsy had been done. As I say, they found visceral, they found signs of alcoholism, but it's one of those things that when the guru dies, you have to try and keep it quiet, which they did for 2 days. Of course, they didn't announce it. And then my friend Robert Vaughan Young made the public announcement on the day that the Challenger blew up. So Hubbard was pushed off the front pages by that. But it also means that the will, leaving $648 million, $500 million to the Church of Spiritual Technology, which will preserve the tech forever. Yeah, CDs will last forever. They don't actually, but got them the titanium steel doors and all of the stuff from their 2 repositories, so it will last forever. Hopefully, when in 60 billion years' time the Markabians come back again, they'll all speak English, because otherwise, that stuff isn't worth shit.
I know that's true. Let's put it on all these titanium plates or whatever they are. Let's put it into this mountain bunker. Let's protect it, but it's only in English. At least there's a crank. I heard there was a crank kind of disc player where you could crank it if there was no electricity and then play L.Ron Hubbard, because I don't doubt that if that happens and it is the apocalypse, that people are going to be like, oh yes, let's go find that L.Ron Hubbard stash of culty info.
Yeah, where is the information about how to put flowers in a vase? Where is that brilliant policy letter about the Saint Hill car park? All of this, incredibly necessary. That was one of the things, when I came to write Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, I went, so what's the cosmology of Scientology? And I went, I don't know. Wait a minute. In the data series, he said, you've got to have the importance of information. It's got to be listed according to what's the most important information in Scientology. Well, it's about the car park at St. Hill. If that's not right, nothing else will work. But which bits are the most important? And I gave an answer to that. I wrote a chapter in Blue Sky to say, okay, before the beginning was the cause, and the entire purpose of the cause was to make a huge amount of money. But I had to bounce around through, one of the vital ideas of Scientology is that you are perpetually individual. You are not part of a composite. So, it's not like the Buddha mind or Nirvana or what have you, or any other rock band for that matter. You are separate. So where does it say that in Scientology? It's not in the factors. It's not in the axioms. No, it's process R247 in Creation of Human Ability, where he's proved that we're all separate. You're going, isn't that a bit important? This, and so you don't get that. And so, if somebody says to you, what is Scientology? What do Scientologists believe? It's like the simple answer is a load of nonsense. But beyond that, when somebody's got all of these discs, and I believe they are gold CDs, this is before DVD, Blu-ray, or modern technology. So they've got a litter of all of these things with millions of words on them and no sense. I'm not kidding. So somebody's come from Helatribus or Arslycus or Markab which in the last 76 trillion years are the only other systems that have existed, by the way. Those are the three that Hubbard keeps talking about over the years. Holotrobus, Ars Lichas, which to those of us in England actually has a different meaning, or Markab. They will come down, the fourth and fifth invader forces from Venus and Mars will come and look and find these discs and wind up the CD player and find L.Ron Hubbard. But what's the order you're meant to do this in? How do you do this? But still, we won't, hopefully we won't be there unless we keep reincarnating until we become Markabians. But
yeah. And you said $500 million. So L.Ron Hubbard left the Church of Spiritual Technology, $500 million.
Or David Miscavige did, because as I say, the will is a forgery.
That's right.
The last real will is 1981, and it left everything to his granddaughter, Roanne, who's told me that she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's not going to contest it. Don't come after her. Leave her alone after spending the first 34 years of her life confined. I mean, she was 7 when she was taken to the base, and I think Jenna was her playmate as a child. So, imagine being in this 500-acre razor wire surrounded place with people screaming their heads off and running around, and no childhood involved.
Yeah.
Really terrible. But yeah, so the bulk of the fortune went, and the original purpose of the Church of Spiritual Technology, which was later changed, is simply to perpetuate the name L.Ron Hubbard.
So they think, and the CST, Church of Spiritual Technology, I remember thinking, oh, they're the ones who handle, what did I remember thinking they did? They did the vaults.
That's right.
They did the vaults and getting all of L.Ron Hubbard's information in there. And Author Services, who handled his fiction works, did fundraising for the project of the vaults.
Yeah.
And Author Services, but it's like now, what do they do with the $500 million? Because they're constantly fundraising to do that project.
Well, when you say they, unless you're talking about all of the body thetans that cluster together, we're talking about one individual.
Yeah, we're talking about David Miscavige.
Yeah, Scientology is an absolute monarchy, a tyranny, a dictatorship, as putting all the executives in a double trailer, the whole for 8 years kind of shows. So the question is, hey, David, if you're watching, where is the money? Now, hopefully Jeffrey Augustine will work this out, because if anybody can work it out, is Jeff, just incredible. But there was a little bit of a clue back in the early 90s. We discovered that David Miscavige had what's called a living trust, registered in the Netherlands Antilles, which is, of course, where the Freewinds is registered. And money was pouring into that. And I'm thinking, like guru, like devotee. So, in fact, the fundamental purpose of Scientology was to put money into L.Ron Hubbard's bank accounts. When he died in his mobile home, because he kept having his house remade, restyled, he never moved into it. It was, oh, let's have it ranch style one week. And it was, no, I'd like it Persian. So they'd fit it all out, then rip all the stuff out and do it again. So he ended up living in pretty much in a trailer for 6 years. And he'd have stacks of attaché cases up the walls, each one with $100,000 in. And he'd keep saying to Pat Broker, I need more of these. I need more of these. Oh dear, religion, eh?
So they would, so would it would be through David Miscavige then that L.Ron Hubbard would get the cash?
Yes.
Like would he David Miscavige would bring the cash. So would they, I mean, back then were just people paying in cash, or did they take the money out of the bank in cash and then give it to broker for L.Ron Hubbard?
There were always ways of moving money into accounts that were controlled by Ron Hubbard. So on the shrinking world of L.Ron Hubbard, which everybody ought to watch. Everybody ought to watch it, because if you want to see what he was really like, there he is. And it's the only place where you see him in a hostile interview. But Charlie Nairn It's back in 1968 on board the Royal Scotsman, what would later become the Apollo. And Charlie asked him about, the Swiss bank accounts. And Hubbard said, I do have one Swiss bank account. And he'd have these accounts set up. There were tens of them. And so what organizations thought they were doing was paying money to the flag operation liaison office, or one of these, or up through the Guardian's office when that was running it. So they'd be paying all of this money, and what they didn't realize was it all poured into accounts that were completely controlled by Hubbard. Once he'd gone into hiding, he couldn't have any connection to anything, because that way the Justice Department would have found him. So he had to trust Pat Broker. He had to trust Pat Broker, who had control over these accounts. So they would go, and presumably Las Vegas was one of the banking outlets. And part of the thing was that under American law, you can't have more than a certain amount in a bank account without having to report to the IRS. So they'd have tens of bank accounts, all, 1 cent below that level, so they could draw money out. And it really did get to be a problem having enough accounts, because there are times when Scientology was making so much money. I mean, again, when Charlie Nairn interviewed him in 1968, before they went on camera, Charlie arrived at about 1 o'clock in the morning and asked if he'd come aboard, and sat with Hubbard for 3 hours before they recorded. And he got out of Hubbard this admission: it was a scam. It's really hard, but Hubbard said, "Oh yeah, of course it is. Obviously it is." It's like, okay. And he said, "Well, why do you do it then?" And well, actually, first of all, he said, that must be really hard for you, having to conceal that. You poor narcissist, not being able to tell people you're ripping them off. It's so hard for you,
Why would he admit that? Why would L.Ron Hubbard admit that to a journalist?
I think it was just one of those moments that one of the drugs that Hubbard was fond of, and he said he'd been addicted to it. There's a lecture, a recorded lecture, where which I report in a paper called "Never Believe a Hypnotist." So you can go and find it in the research and discovery volumes if you've got the old ones. I imagine since I pointed this out, it may have disappeared. But he says that it was difficult getting off phenobarbital. I made myself a guinea pig on one of these experiments. So he names the drug. Now, phenobarbital, the barbiturate drug, is very close to sodium pentothal, the truth drug. And every now and then in lectures, Hubbard will tell the truth. So did he study nuclear physics? All right, 23rd of September, 1950, a lecture called Introduction to Dianetics. Hubbard admits that he failed the only course he did in atomic and molecular physics. And you're kind of going, he's telling the truth. This doesn't happen often. So I think sometimes it just slipped out, the truth. So Charlie's
because of the drugs that he was on. Holy crap.
Something very much like the truth serum.
Yeah.
So Charlie says, well, why do you do it then? And he said, oh, it's very nice being able to tell your wife at the end of every day, we've made another $10,000. That's, let's go 1968 to now. That's like saying, I know, $120,000 a day that's going to their personal bank accounts. The other thing he said is, but what he really liked was catching the clever ones and reeling them in. And that tells you you're dealing with a 10-year-old who's really hates all of the other children for calling him a ginge and saying he's fat. And so he's going to get his own back on them. And that's, in terms of emotional maturity, L.Ron Hubbard never got past that same kind of vindictive attitude, which we see in certain politicians who will remain nameless.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So they're moving all this money around. What blows my mind the most about that is that the fundraising never stopped. Like, there's always been this demand on Scientology public. How much money is enough money? So once then L.Ron Hubbard he's got all that money that he's stashing, and then Pat Broker and David Miscavige siphoned some off. So are you saying then that David Miscavige, that account he had out of the country, the Living Trust, was that his personal account? That was money that only he had access to?
I deeply and profoundly believe that the majority of the money that goes to Scientology is actually in personal accounts controlled by David Miscavige. There may be corporations. I mean, he controls every one of the corporations. He has signed undated resignations for every corporation. So if you annoy him, all he has to do is write the date on your resignation and you are gone.
Mm-hmm.
So he has control of all of the money and can put it where he wants. And it seems to be this weird thing that with human beings, it's like once they've accumulated enough money to keep them going for 1,000 lifetimes, they just want to accumulate more money. It's a madness among human beings.
Yeah.
So you get somebody like Elon Musk, who is worth $400 billion, though with the crash in Tesla shares, that may be a lot less. And the various two crashes of SpaceX this year as well. But why does somebody want to have that much money? Why does somebody want to have that much power? And the answer is they're very greedy. And David Miscavige fits into that. So when you hear that Bob and Trish Duggan pitched in $360 million to Scientology, you're going, so where is that money? Is it running Ideal Orgs, which have got 3 staff members in them? Is it making gold-plated escalators? Where is that money? And is David Miscavige, and I have met Scientologists that believe this, that they put the money into a Swiss bank account and they memorize the number so that when they're born, when they pick up their new body, they'll be able to go and get the money. Swiss banks have got so much money that's not been claimed.
From Scientologists.
Among others, you know, people who believe that they'll have this magical trick. And you know, we've said this before, but you say to somebody, okay, well, tell me about your lifetime in medieval China or wherever, and they'll say, oh yeah, I was there and I did this, and you say, just give me one sentence in the language of that time and place, and they can't.
Yeah,
you know, Ron Hubbard, there's this story in Spain. They got kicked out of Spain. They were in, I think, Alicante, and they got kicked out because nobody could speak Spanish. Now Hubbard's saying, you've had all these past lives, you know, so you can do anything. You know, he actually sent one of the ships out with nobody who was qualified to run it, and it didn't sink because in your past lifetime, well, surely somebody out of the 200 crew had spoken Spanish at some point over the last few centuries, but apparently not.
That's amazing. That was and that's definitely, I can speak to that. In the Sea organization, that was kind of the attitude. Well, you know, you lived multiple lifetimes. You've had multiple children, which is what justified you not having children now, or you've had multiple lifetimes spending time with your family. Right now you're focused on Scientology. And to find out after leaving, of course, that all of the money was going to L.Ron Hubbard, and now all of the money goes to David Miscavige, or at least he has control over all of it, which is the same thing, including these offshore accounts that you're talking about. That just blows my mind, because it just, like, how much further do you need to look at? If I were a Scientologist still and I found that out, that would be like, I'd be done. I think initially for some, they might think, oh, well, we need to fix this. He's corrupt. We need to get him out of there. But I don't think it's going to get any better, because it's how it's always been. What do you think about that, Jon? What do you think if, you know, David Miscavige is, what is he, in his 60s now? Yeah,
he's born in 1960, so he'll be 65 this year.
That's right. So he's 10 years older than me. We're going to assume that he's in decent health. From what I understand, you know, if he needs to see a doctor, he does.
Well, he is a chronic asthmatic. He has serious asthma. He needs a Ventolin or some other kind of drug on a daily basis, as did Ron Hubbard. Hubbard too was asthmatic, but not as badly so. Looking at Ron Miscavige's book, David Miscavige really died as a child from asthma attacks. So that means that he'll have had a lot of corticosteroid treatment. That may well have interfered with his development physically. It may also have given him this testosterone problem that he seems to have, which comes out as rage and whoring in
When
Las
you
Vegas.
say testosterone problem, do you mean too much testosterone?
Yeah.
Which this long-term steroids, would it have that effect?
Yes. Yeah. But and very small testicles.
You verified this. I mean, are you joking, or you know that for a fact?
No. If people take steroids, but anabolic steroids,
Yeah.
then they have massive muscles and tiny testicles.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. So much for you, Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
The Terminator. So I think that may be a limit, but he's also a smoker, and I've heard that smoking can be bad for you. So even though, and of course, he's choleric by temperament. He's somebody who
What
rages.
does choleric mean?
It's the temperament of rage. L.Ron Hubbard based his emotional tone scale on the 4 humors, which have been around since Galen in the 1st century AD, a Roman doctor, and they relate to the fluids in the body. So you have the sanguine temperament, which is blood, which is happy. You have the melancholic temperament. Melan means black, cola is bile, and that's one of your 2 bile chambers. I don't remember which. The other is choleric, which is yellow bile, the other bile chamber. That's angry. And then you have phlegmatic, and that's snot. So the tone scale, apathy through melancholy to rage through to cheerfulness. So that's your original tone scale. Though, of course, all of the major ideas in Scientology come from Ron Hubbard.
Wow.
It's not actually true. So, but Miscavige,
I never heard that before.
Miscavige is choleric. He is a very angry person, and angry people don't tend to have long lives. They tend to blow their top and bang things around. So I don't wish the man any harm. I really don't. And if he wants to give me a call, then he can come over. But no shouting. Okay.
Yeah, no shouting.
No shouting.
All of
and
that,
a Hannibal Lecter mask just to make sure.
He has to wear that before he sits down to speak with you. That does make a lot of sense. What do you think would happen if something happened to David Miscavige and he was no longer around, whether he blew or, eventually passed away? I get that question a lot.
I love that word, blue. It's one of the last words to leave the vocabulary of an ex-Scientologist.
When he takes off, makes like a banana and splits.
When he realizes he's committed overts and has to leave, which is what the word actually, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it does have the American slang meaning of just leaving, blowing. So, but there's this with us. There's this kind of, am I admitting when I say I blew that I'd done something evil and bad and wrong? And like L.Ron Hubbard, who had to keep moving every 6 months, because of his overts. This question struck me the other day. It comes back repeatedly. What happens when Miscavige dies? When the dictator fails, unless they've groomed a successor, then everything comes apart. And there are historical instances of dictators who have groomed successors, but I can't think of any one of them that's been successful. Maybe Genghis Khan, because his grandson Kublai became emperor of China. He wasn't very nice, though. Franco in Spain groomed Juan Carlos, the king. And as soon as Franco was dead, Juan Carlos held elections, said, don't want to do dictatorship. It's horrible. Hitler died in a bunker. Maybe that's what will happen to DM. Maybe he'll die in the underground bunker. But there is nobody who's got the chutzpah to take over. He's got rid of anybody who had any opposition or aggression, any strength. And so he's just got clones and drones, people who are just wandering around. So when I first started doing this, when I was a very, very young child, 40 years ago, I sort of thought, I don't want to stop Scientology. If people want to do this, that's up to them. But I would like to clip its claws and pull its fangs out, because it's hurting people.
Yes.
And that was my thought back then. And it was sort of, so it would be good if, you know, the nice indies took over, and
the independent Scientologists, the people doing Scientology outside of Scientology.
The squirrels, as they're also known by Scientology. It'd be nice if they, that's what I thought back in about 1984, a year made famous by George Orwell. But I've changed my mind. I no longer think that Scientology is a matter of beliefs. And of course, people are welcome to have their beliefs. Scientology is a series of practices. It's a series of hypnotic applications that create states of euphoria in people and dependency. And it's all hypnotic in its application, because you're dealing with guided imagination. You're taking the person's imagination over and making all sorts of ludicrous claims. You know, the book I'm writing at the moment, I've gone back to the claims that were made in Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, about photographic memory. Everybody that's done this within, I think it's 30 to 1800 hours, everybody, unless they've got brain damage, will have photographic memory, perfect IQ, total recall, right through to conception. And they'll be immune to colds, viruses, all of these. You know, they'll have fantastic hearing, eyesight. There won't be anything wrong with them ever again. And you're going, that wasn't true, was it? And he says, no, 273 cases. That's what it says. In 1950, 273 cases. It's none of it true. Nor any of the other claims. Nobody has the ability to leave their body to exteriorize and go to anywhere in the universe and see whatever they like. You've got the remote viewing nonsense of Ingo Swann. But even Ingo, who was a con artist, even Ingo said he could already do it before he got to Scientology. Nobody in Scientology has ever got these things. And yet people are fanatically devoted to it. Now, that's got to be interesting, hasn't it? That it doesn't work. It doesn't make a happy, joyful society. It makes the misery, the slave of the organization. That's what Scientology does. And it drains people's money away. And yet they are addicted to it. They've got to have more of it.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
The answer to that's relatively complicated. And my book, Opening Our Minds, is an attempt to answer that question, the dimensions of that question. But the simple thing is it makes people high. You know, you have very good indicators that the end phenomena of almost every Scientology process, good word, that process, is that you'll have very good indicators. Now, Hubbard he was 16, he claims, when he first studied hypnotism. He worked as a stage hypnotist, just for the fun of it, in the late 1940s. And then in 1951, in a book, he wrote, "Never believe a hypnotist." So he admitted he was a hypnotist, and he said, never believe a hypnotist. We're being told something there, perhaps. So we get high and we want more. It may well be that the E-meter has a direct effect. There are various theories about this, but one of them is a comparison to the TENS machine, that the pain relief that a TENS machine gives is by passing a low voltage current through your body. Well, the E-meter does the same thing. So maybe there are other theories about what it might be doing that's messing your brain up. I really don't know. But outside of that, you've got the whole environment, you've got all of the promises, and it appeals to our narcissism. It appeals to our selfishness. We want to be godlike. We want everybody to love us. We want to have power. And so we don't notice. You know, I mean, when I first arrived in Scientology when I was 19, I didn't have any money. And the lovely people at the Moseley, Birmingham mission of Scientology put me out on the street to, not to do that, put me out on the street to recruit people. Here's your clipboard. What would you most like to be? What would you most like to do? What would you most like to have? Come and have a free personality test.
Mhm.
And I was quite good at it. And what I couldn't understand was why none of them would go out on the street and do it. And the further I went into Scientology, the more I realized that the higher up the bridge you get, the less able you are to communicate with raw meat, dead in the head wogs, as Hubbard so affectionately termed non-Scientologists.
That's right. That does make a lot of sense, because you're right. And that's been something that so many people never in Scientology often comment on, is when they read the success stories or listen to the testimonials, like on Scientology's own website, Scientology.org, that they're not actually saying anything. It's all very these general terms of my space got bigger and cleaner and my flows opened up, just very generic, not any real meat and potatoes that they can specify. And I remember as a Scientologist, that feeling at the end of a course or an auditing step of being excited to be done. Like the win was I finished it and I don't have to do it anymore. And I didn't recognize that until after quite some time after I left Scientology. Because I kept thinking, well, but I wrote success stories, but I also knew if you didn't write a success story, you have to go redo the course. So it really got me thinking, like, I could not be the only one. And because it's all I ever did growing up in Scientology is do a course. And of course, I got really good at, I'm going to write a success story. You know ahead of time what the course is supposed to deliver. So if you want to be past, you want to go on to the next thing. And I'm very like, I like games. And so I'm like, oh, you do the one step, you get to the next step, you get to the next step.
Yeah.
So for me, the win was not having to do the one thing anymore, but, just getting to that next step. And I wonder how many other Scientologists might feel that way too.
I think it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember thinking too, when I went to Los Angeles, for example, to do some of the upper operating Thetan levels. And then after I left Scientology, I looked back on that time and I thought, but when I went to Los Angeles for my services, I'm like, I would feel better. But then I had to remind myself, I looked back at that time, I thought, you know what? I had 3 fairly young kids. So when I went to Los Angeles, I was by myself. I was sleeping 8 to 9 hours a day. I would take vitamins because you needed to when you were doing auditing. So I'm sleeping, I'm taking vitamins, I'm eating lots of protein, I'm taking care of myself, because when you're receiving Scientology auditing, those are the things that you do. You have to be well fed and you have to sleep well. Well, that would make anybody feel better. Some time away from the household, you're not working or cleaning or doing whatever it is. That just blows my mind. It was that simple.
When I was first down at St. Hill, I was doing the academy levels. So training as a hypnotist, training as an auditor. And I was on the first of them, which is the Class 0 course. And there were, you were told every course would take 2 weeks, and nobody finished in 2 weeks. So nobody, there's always this estimate, but as the years went by and you watched people, you realize that people took a lot longer on these courses than these estimates. So that was not in fact true. But there was a point where 4 of us, so we were twinned, you have somebody that you work with. There was a point where 4 of us went into East Grinstead, which is 4 miles away from St. Hill, and where the people loathe, despise Scientologists. because you've got to maintain friendly relations with the environment and the public, as Aaron.
Yeah. Which
know,
they didn't often do.
No, they were rubbish. They were absolutely rubbish at it. They scared the local inhabitants. But we had to go into town to do tone spotting to see what people's tone levels were.
Yeah.
And I realized when I got back that the other 3 people had all cheated. They'd all cheated. Well,
how's that?
They wanted to, as you say, get through.
Yeah.
Tick off that bit of the checklist to get to the next thing, because I had put a question to them about, because you were meant to observe the social tone, what people are pretending to be, which is above death. And, it's what we just mentioned, the 4 humors, you've got the apathetic, the grieving, the sympathetic, the irritated, the 1.1s, the covertly hostile, which of course L.Ron Hubbard attributed to all gay people. Thank you so much, Ron. They're all backstabbers, through to anger and all this, boredom and cheerfulness and enthusiasm and serenity of beingness, which is of course my permanent condition. And you're meant to see that, but you're also meant to see the chronic, the long-term tone level. And the problem that I pointed out was that there are 2 contradicting Hubbard statements, one of them in Scientology 8008 and the other in a bulletin called Hypnosis in the Tone Scale. And the other 3 students, they didn't even want to think about it. I got sent to qualifications when I got back. Nobody, which you didn't have to pay for back then, so that was okay. Yeah. Nobody ever resolved this flat out contradiction in the Hubbard teaching. Of course, as the years went by, I found hundreds of such contradictions, and you kind of skip over them. You don't really notice them. But I realized then and there, so this is quite early on in my Scientology career. I've been involved for a year and a half at this time. I realized that there was this urge to get to the next level. Yeah. And the next level would be where it would happen. So when after OT3, finally 7 years in, I've got, done OT3 and I do this thing for 3 days and I attest to it, can't find any more body thetans anymore.
3 days?
3 days.
You did it for 3 days?
Yeah.
And they attested you?
Yeah. And the guy doing that was held to be one of the greatest auditors in the known universe. So they let, so I'm done. I haven't got these. And of course, you've got to remember I'm a natural clear. So I didn't have the Xenu incident personally. I decided I'd avoid that. I was in another part of the galaxy at the time. Nowhere else in the many other parts of the universe has anybody had these incidents. They only occur in this sector of the galaxy, which is a kind of conundrum that nobody has ever drifted in from the other 100 billion galaxies. Let me say that again, 100 billion galaxies. We don't see anybody from there because they don't like it here because it smells bad or something. I don't know what it is. But so I was a natural clear. I didn't have a reactive mind. And so I think the thought at the time was that it would be, and it makes sense to me, that I wouldn't have had this stuff. I just maybe picked up a few stray body thetans as I went along. But so 3 days and I went back in, I tested it. And then within 3 days, as is, by the way, perfectly normal, within 3 days, the collapse happens, the roller coaster. And it happens in faith healing as well. It's not just Scientology. What typically happens is you get the adrenaline rush, you get the euphoria, and then you get the collapse. That's how the human body works. Same thing happens if you're chased by a tiger, as L.Ron Hubbard pointed out. You'll get the adrenaline, and then you get opioids on the back of that. So endorphins.
I heard with Molly or ecstasy too. It's like it can be really fun to do, but the next day it's like,
I think the reality of that is if you take an extremely large dose, the people that were reported as doing that were ravers who were going out 3 nights a week and taking 8 hits a night. And then, yes, they'd get serotonin depletion. I think in the therapeutic use of it, it's been legalized in Australia for therapeutic use, for example.
Wow. So a small amount of ecstasy or Molly wouldn't do that? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, it's a reasonable amount. You take a hit and a bump and don't do more than that. And don't do it more than once every week or two. and you're probably okay. Unfortunately, there isn't enough scientific literature on it. I've been fascinated and standing back from the use of hallucinogens and, in this case, amphetamines. Of course, MDMA is an amphetamine. I've been watching that for decades, and I've had various enthusiastic ex-Scientologists go, "Oh yeah, take ayahuasca, it's fantastic," or "Take LSD," and I'm like, "Yeah, a little bit hesitant about that."
Yeah, we're gonna let that play out.
Let's let the
The vomiting,
yeah.
the vomiting is what keeps me away from ayahuasca. I'm like, all that vomiting, and I'm like, no, that's not for me.
No, absolutely not. A friend of mine actually took it. 20. He's sadly a late friend of mine. Wonderful, wonderful man. But he was playing in a band in Brazil, and got out into the Amazon somehow. Though I think it's the other side of it normally. And did ayahuasca with natives there. And he came to me
Wow.
and said, "Jon, angels come and talk to you." And I said, "Thank you very much. No." If I want to talk to myself via hallucinations, I'll do it some other way. It really not interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint anybody that's watching.
A little aloha to Rod. Thank you so much for your super chat. Love you guys. Thanks for all you do. Thanks, Rod. Thanks for being here.
So yeah,
Okay, so
but you get very much. Yeah, back to the ayahuasca. In Scientology, what is happening, and in so many other groups. I mean, I put up a piece at the weekend with Anne L. Peterson, who worked with Werner Erhard. I really want to call him Werner Erhard, but Werner Erhard, who is the supreme con artist. And what this guy is doing is you stress people out like hell over 3 days, and then you release it. And that's all you need to do. So you humiliate, abuse, screw them up, dominate them for 3 days. And in brain terms, what happens is that you will build up dopamine that you can't release. The other way of saying that is your anticipation will be dampened. You won't be anticipating because it's the anticipation chemical. Then you say, "No, everything's fine." And on that last day, people get high. They get a dopamine dump.
Wow. Just from not being in that stress anymore.
Yeah. Scientology is absolutely doing that.
Oh my gosh, you're right. So finishing, especially some of the upper levels or the processes that take longer, it really is about just getting through it. That makes so much sense because I can recognize that feeling at the end. Because I questioned myself a lot after leaving Scientology because I thought, well, some things I felt like I had gains on, but when I really looked back and tried to articulate what that was, when I tried kind of journaling about it, I was like, I was just happy to be done. But it makes sense that that would happen, and that's why we would do it. God, chemicals are crazy.
Yeah, and whoever and whatever we are, whether we are spiritual or physical or somewhere in between or what have you, not something that bothers me. These many years, I couldn't care less. I take Zhang Su's view, the great Chinese philosopher, that I didn't know where I was before I was born. I don't know where I am after I die. So I better enjoy it, better make the most of it. Epicurean
I feel exactly
stoicism.
that way.
Yeah,
and I fully support that.
Yeah, and luckily enough, I'm not, ill, in pain, depressed, any of those things, and I, life has been at times stressful. Being harassed by Scientology on a daily basis for 16 years was not as much fun as people might think.
Exactly. Not as much fun as they make it out to be, huh?
Yeah. But as with Scientology, one could think of the rundowns as the stop banging your head against the wall rundown.
Yes.
I had such a win when I stopped banging my head against the wall.
Yeah,
So
that is what it feels like.
I went and tested OT3 and I'm told, great, that's fine. And 3 days later, when the inevitable dopamine collapse happened, I thought, well, got to be ethical for this stuff to work. So I went in and I said, yeah, not really feeling any benefit from this. And I expected to have to do a retread, to have to pay for it and do it again. That's all I expected. I even thought
Yeah.
I might be sent to ethics. But what happened was that the guy who was considered to be the greatest auditor in the UK at the time, who'd flipped over and become a registrar, a salesperson, because heck, you get 2% on everything you sell. So that's a much better job than being an auditor.
Yeah.
They'd have cars, the registrars, and eat food and stuff like that. But this guy looks at me and he says, yeah, a lot of people find that. And that blew my mind. It was like I spent 7 years getting here. I'd worked 3 years doing a house up to earn the money to do it, and gone and done it. Now now I'm being told, yeah, a lot of people find it's a piece of shit. So, but what you need is OT4 to get rid of all the drugged body thetans that have clung onto you.
Yeah, that's your problem. You just need your next step.
So I borrowed the money for that and went and did 12.5 hours, an intensive of that. And that was a bit shabby. And again, three days after I'd tested, I went in and said, I'm still, I meant to, all these years of getting to the OT levels, the super levels where you have these fantastic abilities. I said, I'm not really feeling any different. And the same guy looked at me and he didn't even break a smile. He said, a lot of people find that. I'm getting a lot of people find that. So what you need is OT5. So I get onto OT5 and do that. And something, I don't know if I told this story before, but the woman who has owned the mission in Moseley that I first got in through, she wasn't there when I was recruited. She was off in America trying to find out how it was the American missions or franchises were earning so much money and she wasn't earning any. So she was trying to pick up some tips. She came back about 6 months later and she was an OT. She had been on the ship with Ron. Ron had overseen her training to the level of Class 8.
Wow.
At the time, the highest level in the known universe. So she was a Class 8 auditor. She'd done
trained
OT3,
under Ron.
Trained under Ron. And her OT3, I believe, was supervised by Ron Hubbard, right? So he probably didn't get it wrong. And she just seemed utterly miserable to me. When I first met her, she scowled at me. And I thought, oh my God, she's an OT. She's reading my mind. And that's a heck of a way to make you think things that you don't want to think.
Yeah.
Not ever. And every time I saw her, same scowl. She would never call me by name. And I thought, oh, it's because I've got long hair, got hippie hair. Oh, it must be that. There's something about me. She's seeing something dark, about me or something. So 7 years go by, and now I'm doing OT5 at St. Hill, and she's doing OT5. And she comes beaming out of the waiting room, out of an auditing session, and says, Jon, she called me by name. It was amazing. Isn't it fantastic that Ron has come up with something that cleans up the mess that OT3 makes? I'm going, so she'd been miserable for what, 14, 15 years. And she attributed that to OT3. And I saw that in other people. I saw, people I knew who went and did OT3. The woman who was running the Moseley mission when I first arrived, she was just great. She was ebullient. She was spilling over with cheeriness. And then 4 years later, having not seen her, I see her and she's done OT3. And it was as if she was made of stone. She was just so distressed. After I'd left Scientology, she briefly left. And she said it was OT3. I couldn't find any body thetans. And so she had been belittled and humiliated into the position where, as the only sane person in Scientology, it said, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
She had, her emotional condition had been wrecked with this nonsense.
Wow. And there she is wondering what's wrong with her, because they're making it happen in America, and just to find out that Yeah, no. Nobody really gets what they say you get out of it.
Hmm.
So do you think then we were talking about how, what would happen if something happened to David Miscavige and who would take over? Because can you talk a little bit more about the coup, about
Hmm.
how David Miscavige was able to come to power despite the fact that L.Ron Hubbard had hit two other people as saying, you will be in charge?
Yeah, after Hubbard died, an issue called the Sea Org and the Future came out, in which L.Ron Hubbard was promoted to the rank of admiral, and I like that. It's got a ring to it, hasn't it? A cachet, admirable, admiral,
Admiral. Admiral.
admiral, Admiral Lafayette Ronald Hubbard of the Sea Org, and Pat Broker was promoted to the position of first loyal officer, and his wife, Annie Broker, Annie Tidwell, was promoted to the rank of second loyal officer. So the Sea Organization was given to them by Hubbard. It was then later said, and it was quite a lot later, he died in January 86, and it's 1987 before Miscavige takes over. Miscavige has never held a senior position in Scientology. He was a midshipman. He didn't hold rank in the Sea Org. He was not even an officer. His job was to run the All Clear unit to make it safe for L.Ron Hubbard to come out of hiding.
Which he
And
failed at.
he failed completely. There were 300 outstanding writs at the time of Hubbard's death. So who is he? He's a nobody. He's not on the Watchdog Committee. He's not an officer. But what he has had is control of the line to Hubbard. And through that, he's gained a certain amount of power and influence. And he's also, of course, had 6 years of dealing with Pat Broker. And if Pat is watching, and I very much doubt it, I don't like to say this, but I am going to say it because it needs to be said. Pat is spineless. Sorry, Pat. So when David Miscavige one day sent a crew of Sea Org thugs to Pat Broker's office, Pat Broker just folded. And David Miscavige, with no authorization from Ron Hubbard, there is nothing to suggest that Ron Hubbard ever thought that David Miscavige would take over. Nobody has ever questioned it. There are no legal documents in place that this guy managed to take over and get everything, put in his name, rather than, of course, the named successor, David Mayo, who
was David Mayo still there then when L.Ron Hubbard died?
No, he was shoved out by Hubbard, though we thought otherwise, in 1982, but he was the last publicly named successor. Before him, it was Quentin Hubbard. There's a policy letter that says that Quentin was, I think, 8 years old when this was issued, that he would take over. But very, very sadly, poor Quentin killed himself because he couldn't take any more of what was happening to him, the horrible persecution he suffered for his homosexuality from his father. So
David Miscavige comes along, sends thugs in. So Pat Broker gets the boot entirely from the Sea Organization. Do you know any of kind of the details around that?
He goes off to I think just to live in an apartment where, as we've said, for the next 24 years, at a cost of $11 million, he is under surveillance 24 hours a day. Now, this is a question that I took up a few years ago with Tony Ortega, because it's like, well, why was he under surveillance for 24 years? And why was it that when he had him busted, David Miscavige seized all of the filing cabinets in his office?
In Broker's office.
Yes. And the answer to both of these questions is what David Miscavige would most like to have in all the world are the upper OT levels. Now, in 1970, Hubbard issued a statement to the effect that he had taken material from OT 23 and turned this into the list processors, list 10, list 11, list 12, the L's, as they're called, still the most expensive procedures by the minute in Scientology, and absolute nonsense. I mean, Karen de la Carrière, who was one of only 8 people ever trained to supervise these levels, has very openly talked about how ridiculous the material is.
Wow.
But he'd made this statement that there were 23 OT levels. And what Miscavige was desperate for was to find those levels, because, of course, they released OT8 in 1988. You are at cause, willingly, knowingly, of matter, energy, space, and time, both subjective and objective. That's what OT8 is. Oh dear, we haven't seen any success from that. Because, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if there was a single OT8 in the world.
Yeah.
Because they would be stopping us from doing this. But so that didn't work. And Miscavige didn't realize that it doesn't need to work. You just keep selling the bullshit. I mean, there's this story about a conversation that Pat Broker had back when David Mayo was still involved in 82. Pat Broker went to him and said, well, Ron hasn't given us OT8. Why don't we just release something where you can fly your own rudiments? You can, deal on a daily basis with your upsets, your problems, your withholds, what have you, and we'll call it OT8 and sell it. And David was outraged at this thought, and it didn't happen. But it is kind of surprising that Miscavige hasn't come up with any more levels outside of superpower, which is a pretty weird set of techniques. And the truth rundown is a piece of squirreling that owes its origins to David Miscavige, and is a piece of absolute genius. The idea of, even though you experience this, even though you have evidence and 400 affidavits, because it disagrees with what David Miscavige says, it's not true.
Yeah.
But bless
that sounds
him,
accurate. That sounds on brand for David Miscavige. So he takes over from Pat Broker, gets rid of him.
Yeah.
So Pat Broker's out, but he's being followed. He's being surveilled 24/7 for 24 years at the cost of $11 million. And so my take has been, because Pat Broker knows what David Miscavige has done. He knows all of the dirt. He knows those last years of L.Ron Hubbard's life. He knows that they took the money and went to Vegas together and allegedly gambled and allegedly slept with prostitutes. He knows all of that. So it makes sense how he would have him followed, maybe not wanting him to ever speak out about it. I can assume that that's why he had him followed.
I think he still held on to the hope that these upper OT levels existed, and that Broker would be the only person who could have them.
And yes, do you think he thought then that maybe because he got the filing cabinets, but that they weren't in there? Because did you read Tom DeVoch's recent Substack?
I don't read anybody's Substack. What can I say? I'm terrible. I just talk about the stuff. I don't care about collecting any new information about it, So
Tom DeVoch shared in an article that he wrote recently that David Miscavige, he said that David Miscavige told Tom DeVoch over they were drinking scotch, that there was no operating Thetan level 9 and 10. And all David Miscavige had to work with were some notes with a bunch of drawings of penises in the margins, like just penis drawing after penis drawing. And David Miscavige was telling Tom DeVoch, this is what I have to work with. And he was upset about it.
That's a reference to the affirmations.
Okay, I thought so. So I'm glad we're
1940s.
getting into this. Yes. So tell everybody, because we've been like, what is with him drawing penises? What is that about? And I thought, I wonder if it's because of the affirmation. So do tell. Spill the tea, John. I'm here for it.
Yeah. The thing the book I'm just finishing is called If Scientology Ruled the World: Nazi Occultism, Sex Magic, Space Aliens, and the second coming. And all of these topics are, in fact, linked together in this book. What we
Wow.
do
I
have...
wanna real quick, while you're talking about this, I wanna share your website. If one of the mods, actually, you know what? I'll just cut and paste it and throw it in the chat here. This is Jon's website you can go to. It's got all the information. You can go to his YouTube channel. You can see his books on there, but you can go to his YouTube channel too. And he has all his links on there. If you want to help support Jon is in his endeavor of writing these books and getting them out, go find his pay links on YouTube and throw some money at him so that he can keep writing and getting this information out. Well, that's my pitch there. I'll share that again, but okay, go ahead. So affirmations, penis pictures, go.
Yeah. So I wanted, I got into the understanding Hubbard's affiliations with the Aleister Crowley movement a very long time ago. And I'm feeling underlit for a minute. Hang on. Let me just brighten my life up a bit. Oh, that's so much better.
Oh, there you
Doesn't that feel
go. I
better?
thought you didn't have a light. I didn't know you had the light off. I'd have been like, Jon, turn your light on.
I
The
just went
room's
to
brighter.
the colors in the room are brighter. I have an awful feeling of fear. I can't stop thinking about that copper who blew his whistle at me this morning.
My head feels like it has a taut band around it. And for our never Scientology friends, those are directly from a list that we would practice with when doing Scientology auditing. Somebody had to say those things. They were supposed to be originations. You were practicing.
Yeah.
Adam says we're getting to know Hubbard's true penis.
Yeah, and of course,
I just got it when I said it out loud. Adam, that's hilarious. I am a 12-year-old boy. That is like the kind of humor I have. So I found that absolutely funny. We're knowing Hubbard's true penis. Okay. So tell the dirt about the affirmations.
So, I wrote in Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky that there's a chapter called His Magical Career, which talks about Hubbard undertaking ritual magic ceremonies, sexual magic ceremonies in which masturbation was involved. Two guys as well doing this. Back in January to March 1946 with Jack Parsons, the man who's more recently come to fame through Strange Angel, the founder of Jet Propulsion Laboratories, which became NASA. But by that time, he'd lost his security clearance. So Hubbard is deeply into this magical thing. And the idea, the heart of this magic is to bring about the reign of the Antichrist, to bring the war of Armageddon and lots of fear and trouble and horror, but to stop the second coming of Jesus, or the millennium, as it is often known. So
this was the goal?
This is what Hubbard was trying to do with Jack Parsons, to stop Jesus from returning. And we fast forward, that's January to March 1946. And, Parsons loses all of his money and his girlfriend to Hubbard in very short order of time. He even wrote a little book about it later. At the very end, when people got to OT8 in 1988, when it was released, the first issue on it is this mad bulletin dated 5th of May, 1980, in which Hubbard says that his intention is to help the Antichrist and Lucifer and to stop the second coming. And what makes me...
Did he ever say why? Because I've heard this, but why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because the second coming is actually the Markabians. Yeah. So there's this system Markab that he used to make jokes about in the 50s and early 60s. I've only been able to find 3 references to them in the whole compendium of the technology, which of course is very searchable now that people put it online. Only 3 references.
Is just a Scientology thing, right? Or the Markabians or Markabians. That doesn't exist outside of, that I'm aware of.
Well, I do actually have a reflection on this, which I'm not going to share. You have to read the book for it. But a couple of weeks ago, having worked on this for 6 months, I found out what the probable origin of the Markabians is. And it's absolutely fascinating. and now you have to buy the book.
Nicely played, ATAC. Nicely played.
I had to work for it, so should everybody else, or at least pay for it. And so he, somewhere around, I checked this with Janice Gillum-Grady, who's great. I really like Janice. She's so helpful and useful and nice. I love her. So I wrote to her and said, in 79, when you were last with Hubbard, she was one of the first 3 Commodore's messengers. She was 12 years old in 68, I think it was, when she and her brother and sister became the first child slaves to work directly for Ron Hubbard. They were taken away from their education and they had to do exactly what he told them. And for 11 years, 10 or 11 years, Janice was there almost every day with Hubbard, serving his needs. And I said, towards the end in 79, when he went on the lam and back into hiding because of his terrible overts and he had to blow and all of that, did he talk about the Miscavians? She said, oh, yeah. I was like, okay. So this bulletin, this could well be the truth. And there's just one clinching statement in it, which got me. And it says that he first became aware of this in 1945. And that's the year that he met Jack Parsons. And so...
Oh, my God. Are you saying that L.Ron Hubbard wanted to bring about the Antichrist to stop an alien invasion?
And the alien invasion would be led by Jesus Christ.
Oh!
Now, if
wait,
there's
are you sure?
I'm absolutely sure, absolutely confident.
This wasn't shared in Scientology later, right? Because I don't remember this particularly, but I remember him talking about the Marcabs all the time. It felt like.
Yeah, I mean, it's put out there, and along with Halatrobus and Ars Laicus, they're the only 3 civilizations that have existed in the last 1.25 quadrillion years, it would seem. So, it's very limited, really. You'd have thought, 1.25 quadrillion years. How many civilizations have we had on Earth since, Göbekli Tepe, which was about 7,000 BC? We've had the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, various Indian things. We've had lots of them. How come? So that's just in a few thousand years. You'd have thought in quadrillions of years that there'd have been rather a lot more. But Hubbard is focused on Ars Laicus, Halatrobus, and Marcab, because obviously, they took some money from him, or they did something that upset him in a past life, and so he's going to get them.
Yeah, he had a massive hate boner for the Marcabs. I just remember walking away thinking, gosh, he just hates them. But I didn't realize that early on, the bringing about the Antichrist was his way of stopping this alien invasion, or that he thought that. So he believed that. Did Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons believe this too, that Jesus Christ, the second coming, would be an alien invasion led by Jesus? Or did they have their own reasons for getting into that black magic and doing that?
They had different reasons, and I've read I think all of Parsons' published material. There isn't that much, thankfully. I've read too much of, one line is too much of Crowley for me. I really can't stand the man. I interviewed his biographer, who was his literary executor, John Simons, and I found the tape recordings of this from my answer phone the other week, and I'd forgotten all about them. That back in 1984, I called up John Simons, who wrote The Great Beast, and he said, the bastard, he left all of his things to me because he knew I'd do it, and he knew I hated him. So he didn't really like Aleister Crowley very much, but then nor did anybody else, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Their reasons were, and this book will get into the real origins of their thinking too.
Okay, this is the book you're currently working on.
This is the book I'm currently working on. And this is a magical tradition that is perverted generation by generation. And so Crowley believed that he was the beast 666, on whom the whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, will ride, according to the book of Revelation. So he believed that as somebody in every generation since a man called Joachim of Fiore in 1178 put forward this idea that the book of Revelation is not about history, which is what it's actually about, and it says so in the text. It's about prediction. And in every generation since, somebody or many people have come forward with the idea Jesus is going to be here. He's going to be here soon, as the song says. And every generation has had this, you know, the end is nigh, this anticipation. So this is believed by Crowley, who dies in, I think, 1947, in the late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But he's sure that Jesus is going to try and come. And he and Parsons feel that Jesus is a negative force, that Jesus is a pretense, and that we've all been enslaved and brainwashed into Christianity. I mean, Hubbard talks about this in the Philadelphia Doctorate series and says, you know, Crowley, you know, got into trouble because he denied Christ. That was not the only reason. I think the fact that so many of his girlfriends committed suicide got him into a little bit of trouble too.
Wow.
But so they had this sincere belief in the Antichrist as a force of goodness almost. That's not where Hubbard was coming from.
No.
Hubbard was trying to incarnate Babylon, the whore of Babylon, so that he could prevent the second coming. And what he says in this bulletin was released for about a week. It was only available to people doing OT8, and 2 people left because they were outraged by what they saw. And when they saw the copy of it that's been released, they authenticated it. They said, yeah, this was on OT8. And so stripped away now, there's this 1 week where the top level Scientologists, people who've paid $500,000 to get to this place and, you know, been to the ethics officer and been very good for years, never had a nasty thought about L.Ron Hubbard. Some people see this and they go, this isn't what I signed up for. The destruction of Christianity isn't really what I was thinking of when I paid that money, and they left. But here we have Hubbard saying this is what it's about. So what happened was, from the age of 16, Hubbard read the Book of the Law by Crowley, which is worth reading because it's about having absolute and utter contempt for humanity. It's a really, really negative, horrible piece of work that, you know, no compassion, you know, be ruthless. There's that word again. So what Hubbard aims himself at the age of 16, so in about 1927, he reads this, and that becomes his essential text, the Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley. It's very short, very easy to read, very nasty. And he joins the Ancient and Mystical Order of Rosicrucians, AMORC, which is a California-based organization that came into being at the beginning of the 20th century, despite claiming to go back to ancient Egypt, as all these organizations do. The man who started it, a guy called Spencer, actually had a degree in the Ordo Templi Orientis. So this is Hubbard's first immediate contact with an organization that's connected to Crowley's Order of the Eastern Templars, OTO. Hubbard will then contrive ever more magical ceremonies in his attempt to gain power over other people. So this brings us to 2 things, the blood ritual and the affirmations. When Scientology tried to get back documents from its archive that had been given to Omar Garrison to write the authorized biography of Hubbard, and they paid him, I think it was $280,000 not to publish. I mean, they'd paid him quite a lot of money to write the book, then they paid him that not to publish. Omar Garrison wrote 2 pro-Scientology books, Hidden Story of Scientology and I can't remember what the other one's called, actually. Hidden Story of Scientology, and the other one's about it being wrong to arrest the Guardian's office people. Who knew? Just because they'd committed crimes. So Omar was a journalist for hire. He'd written 2 books for them. They hired him to write the biography and connected him to Jerry Armstrong. And Jerry had spent 2 years collecting everything and anything about Hubbard with authorization so to do. And for his own protection, Jerry had copies of some of the worst material, and that included the affirmations and the blood ritual. In 1984, during a court case in Los Angeles, Scientology set about getting this material back, silencing Jerry. They lost the case, but they managed to keep the material for the most part. So we had this tantalizing view. A few of the affirmations were read into the record. They date, I think, from 1946, so just after he's left Jack Parsons without a cent in the bank anymore. And there are pages and pages of them. They're hypnotic affirmations. That people are not familiar with that idea. It was very big in the 19th century. You had all sorts of movements. Napoleon Hill's the most famous in the 20th century, probably Robert Pellman. And what you do is you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I'm even lovelier today than I was yesterday. I'm even more clever today than I was yesterday. And what have you. You keep on bullshitting yourself fundamentally, because that will make you fantastic.
Well, John, some of us are more brilliant than we were yesterday. So speak for yourself.
Yeah. Natalie, you're a glowing personification of the success of affirmative action. What can I say?
I need to make my own affirmations. So is that when he wrote these affirmations?
They're written at a time when he's trying to get a Veterans Administration pension for war wounds, which, because he hasn't suffered. So that's a bit difficult. So
yeah,
people around him at the time, particularly the girl, Jack Parsons' sister-in-law and girlfriend. Life gets very complicated around the magicians who'd run off with him. Sarah, she said that he would actually be lame some days. He would be blind some days. He'd managed to hypnotize himself into exhibiting these conditions so he could get a pension. And despite claiming that he had cured himself completely with Dianetics from his war wounds, which he didn't have, and for more detail on that, let's sell these people a piece of blue sky has lots of detail on that. He would claim to us that he'd cured himself of war wounds, but he actually was collecting a Veterans Administration pension until he died.
What? He was still taking money from the government based on fraud, even though he was sitting on millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. So if my recollection is correct, he was getting $38 a month.
$38. Wow, and he still took it. So then what do the affirmations have to do with the penis drawings when he was researching Operating Thetan 9 and 10?
The affirmations covered two areas. The first is affirmations about how sick he's going to be when he goes and has his interview with the Veterans Administration. And so it's my favorite affirmation is, you have perfect and lovely feet. I don't know what was wrong with his feet, but I'm glad I never saw them, I can tell you.
Yeah.
There's an interview in Look magazine in November, December 1950 where he says his war wounds, where he had conjunctivitis, pink eye, had a fall from a ship's ladder, had been exposed to the flash from a gun which had hurt his eyes and made him cry probably, and something wrong with his feet. So that's the great mystery about L.Ron Hubbard. We don't know what was wrong with his feet, but we're glad we didn't find out. Maybe I'll ask Janice that. She probably did see his feet. Maybe they were webbed. Maybe they had goat's claws on them.
But they're lovely goat's claws.
No, they would have been marvelous. His other set of affirmations were, men are your slaves. That was one of them. Elemental beings are your slaves. That's body thetans, by the way, in another language. So he was doing this. All over the pages of these handwritten affirmations are penis drawings.
Yeah.
And we don't, beyond the idea that he was a sex magician and therefore everything was actually about sex, You know, the wand in Crowleyite magic is the penis. The emissions of the penis and menstrual blood would be mixed together for holy rituals.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is not my kind of religion, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You know, something with some ice cream would be more acceptable. Well, actually, mochi, really, if anybody.
Oh, I love
You know,
mochi. Yeah.
gluten free though, got to be gluten free.
Mm.
So the other thing was the blood ritual, though, and I don't know if I told this story before. I've told it often enough. That one day, a biographer of L.Ron Hubbard arrived on my doorstep in East Grinstead, unannounced. He'd flown in from Washington State or wherever he was living, solely to see me, without making an appointment, and you shouldn't do that. And he said, I'm tired of them kicking my door in to get this material back. So I'm coming here and I'm going to show you the blood ritual. This had been mentioned in the Armstrong case, and nothing of it had been read into the record. The many of your slaves had been read into the record, bits of the
Yeah.
affirmations. This
And when you
hadn't.
say showed up at your door, that was Jerry Armstrong?
It was Omar Garrison.
Omar Garrison, the
Yeah,
biographer.
the biographer who'd
Okay.
been paid $280,000 not
to do it.
to publish
Yeah.
the authentic, genuine biography of L.Ron Hubbard. So I had to work on it with Russell Miller, and we did it instead.
Mhm.
And he said, I'm going to tell them that if they kick my door in again to try and get this material back, I'm going to give you everything. So this is before I think, no, it was just after I published Blue Sky. So it was 1990, somewhere around there. And he said, I'm going to show you this. You can't take any notes. You're going to see it once. Handwritten document, L.Ron Hubbard, mentioned in the Armstrong case, the blood ritual.
Mhm.
It was a handwritten document in handwriting that I recognized.
As
As
L.Ron
it was.
Hubbard's?
Yep. And it was basically a ceremony whereby he and Sarah, his bigamous second wife, of whom in Shrinking World of L.Ron Hubbard, he said, I had no second wife. He had only a first wife and a third wife. He did also say he wasn't very good at maths. So you know, that could just be a lapse in that way. He and his second bigamous wife, Sarah, had undertaken a blood ritual, a ceremony, pledging themselves to the goddess Hathor, Egyptian goddess, who is known as the destroyer of mankind, if that's a bit of a clue, who is also called Babylon in the Crowleyite form, or the Empress, and Hubbard usually referred to as the Empress. So they do this ceremony where there is some spilling of blood. You know, he said he was a blood brother of the Pekuni people. He was a blood brother of Hathor. And this is all part of the sex magic and, you know, bringing down the infernal powers and stopping Jesus from coming around and making everybody happy and any of that kind of stuff.
Plus, Jesus would bring avians, right? That was the big thing.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah.
And the clincher in this for David Miscavige is that in this bulletin, which has never been publicly released, but David Miscavige is aware of it, he says that he's going to reincarnate as a politician.
L.Ron Hubbard does.
Yeah, it's 38 years. I think he's had time. Though he could be one of Donald Trump's body thetans, who knows? And he's going to, as a politician, stop Jesus from coming back. He's going to say, no, Jesus, not around here.
It's so crazy how he was so obsessed with that. I mean, to really take it to that level and then create Scientology and then not tell anyone in Scientology what it's really actually about, because after the original people who did the original operating Thetan level 8 read that, where L.Ron Hubbard said what he said, right? That there, didn't he say like there was no Christ and other stuff about him?
Christ is an implant. Christ is made up by the Nicomedeans in 600 BC or in Incident 2 75 million years ago. And I have been to heaven and all of that. Absolute nonsense. He didn't exist. And then he's going, yeah, he does. And he's going to come and get me if I don't do something about it.
Yeah, and then he backtracks on that and changes operating Thetan level 8 because too many people left. But you're saying there's this bulletin and David Miscavige is aware of it.
Hmm.
And say again what it was about. What was the main point of it?
Well, firstly, it was not issued until after Hubbard's death.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't stupid enough to do that.
Yeah.
And it was the introduction in 1988 aboard the Freewinds when people did OT8.
Yeah.
This was the first bulletin. Now, it's a compilation, as are many of the things that were issued after 1980. Ray Mithoff would have been asked at some point to cut and paste bits of Hubbard into a text that he would write. So talking with Jesse Prince and Nancy Meny 10 years ago back at Toronto, and just they were together at that time, and I'd met Nancy once before, just a couple of months before in Dublin, and was very impressed by her. And he said that he came in while she was reading this OT8 bulletin, and she was marking it. And he's saying, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I'm marking the bits that are Hubbard and taking out the bits that are Mithoff." And he looked at it and he said, "You're exactly right. How did you know?" And he said, "Well, I was on his Telegram line for years. You know, his fax, whatever. I can't remember what it's called. The machine they used, but he would send orders through Nancy, and she'd decode them. So she'd become used to the way he wrote." And it's true, you can tell that there are bits of this thing that have been put together. This again, it's something that's probably not broadly known, but from somewhere in the early 1970s, Hubbard had a sound recorder that was sound activated all the time. So every time he farted or belched, this thing would go on. And in 1993, in LA, I interviewed a guy called Ken Rose, who had been the head of Ron's Technical Compilations, or RTC. And he liked using the same initialisms. That's the right word. They're not acronyms unless you can say them. Laser and radar are acronyms, but BBC is an initialism, not an initialization. It's so complicated, the world we live in, you know. But so he finds himself, you know, here we are with this bizarre concept that he is here to stop the Second Coming, because the Second Coming is an invasion of Markabians. This, of course, will be picked up by Captain Bill Robertson. And the Free Zone, the independent Scientology movement that is called Ronsorg, or the Free Zone, derives from Captain Bill. And for a while, it was the largest group of Scientologists ever, because they were in Germany, they were in Russia. There were tens of thousands of people following Ronsorg. And Captain Bill, of course, in 1982, after he was thrown out of Scientology, he was the second deputy commodore, which means, in fact, in the Sea Organization, because Mary Sue was gone, he was the next in charge after Hubbard, but he was thrown out. And he started receiving telepathic messages from Ron Hubbard, who by now was dead and on the mothership. He wasn't dead. He was in Creston, going mad, suffering from dementia. And he started talking about the Markabian invasions. And I had the grand privilege over an 8-month period after I left Scientology and went, oh, I really don't want to do this anymore. I had the grand privilege of seeing Bill every week or two because he was living in East Grinstead. He kept coming around saying, John, come back to Scientology. All's forgiven, you know. And I'd say, tell me a bit more about the guy who committed suicide in Edinburgh, James Stewart, or tell me a bit more about how you persecuted psychiatrists in Los Angeles. So I, you know, but I got all of this stuff about the Markabians. And according to Bill, in 1983, there were already 200,000 of them here.
200,000
on Earth, ready to go.
Wait, but what? 200,000 what?
Markabians.
Oh, already here on Earth.
Yeah, and they look just like us. Well, not like you and me specifically, but they're in Switzerland, in Basel, and they were running transcendental meditation. And Bill, because Bill was, forgive me, a complete lunatic, he put together this amazing list of all of the places they'd taken over. And as I found to be the case with all of the prophets and gurus I've looked at, and I'm sad to say this, their prophecies don't work. Their histories don't work either. The more we find out about the real historical past, the less we believe in Madame Blavatsky and people who made all sorts of preposterous utterances. Or L.Ron Hubbard, of course, in History of Man. The history of us all as we descended from clams, the grim weeper, the boohoo. So the idea is that whatever you thought you were doing in Scientology, you were actually putting together the resistance against Jesus.
That is absolutely the most amazing thing about that is Scientologists have no idea. They don't know. I don't know one person in Scientology that I can think of that I knew that, one, would be okay with that. And secondly, that believed that. That's the crazy thing about this con, this long con, is it's not even doing what L.Ron Hubbard said it was going to do. They're not trying to create a world without war, without criminality, without insanity. His whole intention was to stop an alien invasion that would come if there was a second coming. I mean, that is a lot to wrap one's head around. So tell me what you think. What do you think David Miscavige believes about this or knows about this?
Oh, this is a tough one, isn't it? That firstly, he knows everything about it.
So everything you told me, we've talked about here. Yeah, David Miscavige knows.
He won't know about Hubbard's occult antecedents, but he will know this bulletin, and he will know that Hubbard is saying Christianity is evil and must be stopped, and that's the mission. The problem is with Hubbard himself, it's pretty obvious when you go through his writings that some days he believed what he was saying and other days he didn't. He frequently contradicted himself. It just runs all the way through, in Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health, it's packed with contradictions. Again, you can find many of them or some of them in Never Believe a Hypnotist, which is on my website. Unless, of course, you want to hear me reading it out, which is on the YouTube channel. Why do people do that? I don't know. But there it is. You can listen to it on a podcast or what have you. But in Dianetics, he makes absolute statements. Was hypnotism used in the research of Dianetics? No. And then later in the same book, he says hypnotism was used in the research of Dianetics.
Yeah.
I read the book 3 times. I didn't notice that. It's only when you go back and look and you start, instead of looking for ways to help people, which was all I was interested in, or ways to achieve emotional equanimity, which was my essential target. I wasn't really interested in OT powers initially. I just wanted to have control over my emotions so I never felt bad. Like any reasonable human being. And didn't work, didn't ever work. I felt rotten by the time I left Scientology, and I think I probably felt worse on a declining basis throughout my membership because I was having to believe stupid things and there wasn't any choice, so I had an incredible sense of liberation the first year after I left because I could decide what I thought was right and wrong. Yeah. I could be self-determined, the thing I'd been promised, which meant agreeing with everything that Ron Hubbard says. That's Ron determined, which is the real purpose of Scientology.
Ron determined. That's funny. I want to grab a couple questions here for you.
Yeah, please do.
Buckled Up Buttercup. What about the Antichrist? Was that part of the occult narrative? Well, I think we talked about that though, right?
But it is essential to the narrative that Hubbard states in this bulletin that his intention is to assist Lucifer, and the Antichrist. So, yeah.
Wow. Which kind of goes into this next question from Carla's loving wife. This is some crazy stuff. How can I fact check the LRH and Jesus stuff before sharing with others and my government representatives? You think Florida would care?
Well, curiously enough, my friend Marjorie Wakefield, who I don't know if she's even still with us on this earth, but she wrote a book called something like What Every Christian Should Know, in which she listed a lot of the statements that Hubbard made. Probably the essential document would be the Routine 3 Heaven, which is a Hubbard Communications Office bulletin of the 11th of May, 1963. It is somewhere online. This is an authentic, publicly issued, not confidential, Ron Hubbard bulletin where he says he's been to heaven and it's fake. And so that's something that's worth sending to every Christian minister you can. Once my book is out, you can, of course, send that to your representative, and we hope to have it out.
Yeah. When do you think the book's going to be available?
I hope to finish writing it in the next week. We're doing edits, and my lovely wife is actually doing a final edit on it. I still have, I think, 2 chapters to finish. But yeah, hopefully in the next week, then we'll get it set up and stick it out on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
With
We're
an
totally
audiobook, ebook, all of that.
Yeah.
And it's got some wild stuff in it about the connection between the Nazis and Hubbard, which I've suspected for 40 years, but I try to be extraordinarily skeptical and base everything in evidence. And most of what's been said about the Nazis and their occult practices is bullshit, but some of it isn't. And there is an absolute connection. There's one man who connects Scientology to the Nazis, that the Aryan race theory went through him to the Nazis, and he was a founder of the Crowley Ordo Templi Orientis. So this one guy stands at the crossroads that leads in one direction to Hubbard and in the other to Himmler and Hitler.
Scientology says that it was the influence of psychiatrists.
Yes, that's probably what it was. I've met psychiatrists, and they drool and they have horns. Have you seen the movie Jojo Rabbit? Check it out. It's about a 10-year-old boy who's in the Hitler Youth, and his imaginary friend is Adolf Hitler. And
I didn't see it, but I know which movie you mean. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
we'll have homework.
The kind of idea of psychiatrists is the idea that this little boy has of Jews. And
wow.
Hubbard's idea that any psychiatrist, psychotherapist, psychologist, anybody with the word psych, meaning spirit, in their name, is part of a conspiracy all over the universe, all of them. And so, I've met psychiatrists, and some of them were evil, and some of them were really interesting and good people. But the thought that all of them are trying to destroy all life, which is what Hubbard said, it's like that idea that if you put 2 rabbis in a room, you'll get 3 opinions. So if you take psychiatrists, they don't agree with each other. They are not in a big conspiracy. And L.Ron Hubbard was a fruitcake, literally. He wasn't a real person. He was actually a cake full of currants and raisins. He was bonkers. He was bonkers.
Yeah, we're learning more about that every time we talk to you. No one says, Jon, thank you so much for doing these interviews. And NYC Girl says, David Miscavige may have erratic behavior because he's hypoxic, low on oxygen, causes people to behave violent. Oh, I didn't know that.
I think there's certainly something physiologically as well as psychologically wrong with him. He's a monster. The amount of people I was talking with, I recorded with Jefferson Hawkins last week, who was 30, nearly 40 years in the Sea Org. And he said to me, people say to me, why didn't I file assault charges against David Miscavige? And it's true. So many people, Mike Grinder talked about, being beaten up by David Miscavige. He is a seriously violent human being and not a good example for a saintly hero.
That's true. Northern Girl says he's a fruitcake. Whoops. A fruitcake with a side of nuts. That would be little nuts, though. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's right.
A fruitcake with a side of tiny nuts.
Tiny testes.
Let's see. Super Weekend Warriors. Jon, what's your thoughts on transcendental meditation, similarities between TM and Scientology?
There are similarities between all exploitative groups. Firstly, in that they're led by predators. Secondly, in that the techniques they use will induce euphoria. I've done a number of videos with Pat Ryan and Joe Kelly, who were, Pat Ryan he went to the Maharishi University. He was deeply involved. He's a highly intelligent human being, as is Joe Kelly. And we got a lot of inside skinny. One of my favorite things was, because people have talked to me about the cities, this thing where you get magical powers, the hopping thing. And it was the first time that it's one of the interviews I did with them, where Pat describes what you actually do, and it's hilarious. Ultimately it's not. I was asked by Collins to write a book about TM in 1991, and I did 6 months research and then decided I didn't want to be harassed by them as well. That was that. But one of the people I interviewed was this lovely woman who'd fractured her coccyx, the base of her spine, doing the city hopping. So they have a limited range of techniques. Repetition of a mantra, which is the name of a deity or demon. Agri is one of them, fire demon, which are not meant to tell anyone. And it does bring about a state of auto-hypnosis, self-hypnosis, where you feel tranquil and lovely. I found that there were people who neglected their children. That was quite commonplace among meditators because they wanted to keep meditating all day. So it's kind of like cocaine, only not as easy to get over. Fundamentally.
That's a lot of meditating.
Yeah. Just round and round. And again, they buy into a similar mythology to Scientology, which all groups have. We're the elect, we're superior, we know better than you do. We're looking down on you. You pulled it in. It's karmic. It's not my fault. Again, my book Opening Our Minds has the whole gamut of gang membership, terrorist organizations, and the techniques that it used. When I first saw the Al Qaeda recruiting manual, I had to sit down because it's just like they're the techniques that are used by the Moonies, they're the techniques that are used by Scientology. It's a way of getting, the particular one is you don't disagree with anything the person says. So you find their reality in Scientology terms and just keep going. And you go, this isn't very honest, is it really? No.
Wow. I'm going to show again. This is Jon's website. You can go to, when you go here on his website, you can find like everything, how to find his books, which are on Amazon. The mods will put that in the chat. I already have it linked down below. And then let's pull up to your YouTube channel, because your YouTube channel,
which is just past 10,000 subscribers after 6 years.
Oh, nice. It did. That's fantastic.
I've had a video on Lad Bible go at the weekend that went to 900,000 views. And you go, they know what they're doing. I don't when it comes to promoting.
And don't you love that?
Let's get up to 10 billion is my next goal. We've done 10,000. Let's get 10 billion. Let's get all of the Markabians, all of the Arslickers, all of the Halatrobians to subscribe.
Yeah. So now people know how to find you there again.
Well,
we got to wrap up. But Jon, as per usual, enlightening, eye-opening, and mildly nauseating.
How very kind.
I
Yeah,
absolutely
great
love
fun.
it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
It's always fun to chat, Natalie, and we'll do
it's
it
great
again
info.
sooner.
Yeah, and the audience had some fantastic questions. We are going to do this again, and please be sure, go follow Jon, go subscribe over at, you can find him here. That's a link, Jon Atack Family and Friends. He's got his video there too on Manson, and you can find his links on there too. He's got his PayPal link and other links if you click here, so you can see how you can support Jon if you want to help out so that he can continue writing these books that we really want to come out. So the next book is coming out hopefully fairly soon. So I know we'll talk more about that. Oh, did I lose Jon? Oh, there you are. I thought you were frozen for a second.
I thought I was frozen for a second, but I'm actually still, yeah, I'm still warm.
There you are. But thank you, everybody. If you could hit that like button on your way out and make sure that you are subscribed as well to Life After a Cult for more interviews, for more content like this. Jon, you hold on for a second. Everybody else, I hope you get out and have an amazing cult-free day.
Please do.